We're up.
It shows we're up.
Chance is live.
Welcome, everybody, to this week's edition of the Liberty First Foundation Roundtable for September 9th, 2022.
Yeah.
Sorry. Drew a temporary mental block. I hate when that happens. But basically, this week there's actually quite a bit of information in the news. And I'm going to start off a lot of information in the news. And I'm sure we're going to touch on some other things. But I want to start this first part of it off concentrating on some medical things.
Wait a minute. Wait.
The first,
You know what? The Queen. We have to give.
well,
her
yes.
God save the Queen. Wait, sorry, that was the Sex Pistols.
No, it's not save the King because the Queen.
Michael's starting it with something medical. This
Death is medical.
This is one of the more definitive physical states that one can be in when speaking medically.
Yeah.
Yes.
Maybe she
Unfortunately,
doesn't
Queen Elizabeth did die. The longest reigning monarch of the English of England at 93 years was her reign, or she was 93 years old and was the longest reigning monarch. I'm not quite sure exactly how long her reign was. But basically from shortly after the end of World War II through today. And as princess, she was actually active at the age of 14 with a lot of the activities that were happening during World War II. She actually has an interesting path to the throne in the fact that the original person that was supposed to reign in place of her father actually abdicated his crown. So that put her father the next in line as the presumed heir, and he took over in 1936, and then upon his passing, she was the presumed heir, and then became queen. So that's enough of English history. We're actually here.
Before we move forward,
ahead.
has
Go
anyone
ahead.
made sure that she identifies as deceased yet?
You know what? Watch out for all the people in the UK. They'll come after you. This is like
Oh, she will. She was.
I'm not
actually
scared. We won once already.
She was
Twice.
actually a very popular monarch.
Oh yeah.
With the English or with British. And for her to reign that long and maintain such a high opinion of the citizenry actually does speak a lot to her. Good evening, Jan.
But I mean,
Hi, Jan.
listen, I'm not going to be somebody who, espouses the knowledge of all things royal. But I don't get it. I honestly don't get it. How hard is it to have a positive, image when you are not really responsible for making any decisions that affect the lives of the constituents?
But she does.
Well, that's actually true
But
too.
what-
No, she does affect a lot. She
affects a lot, but it's still a parliamentary system. The monarchy is such an antiquated thing. She's a figurehead.
Not really. When we look at it, they're a figurehead unlike in the United States where we have the executive branch. So she can't enforce laws, nor does she introduce laws per se, but she has the influence over laws and international policy. So where we would have the president go over to a country and initiate a treaty, she will do that very often for the prime minister, especially if it's a nation where there's some kind of rift. So in the times where we've had presidents like Obama, the most insensitive, self-centered bastard, when he gave her the CD player of all of his greatest hits, or it was an iPod, whatever. That's a major insult and disrupted US UK relations for quite some time. But usually, what she would do is she would step in and be the mediator. She's the person who can continue to have the negotiations, almost like backdoor channel communications, introducing ideas around the world where no other leader could possibly do it. Even if the prime minister is angry, the queen or the king can step in and still have negotiations, and they do influence the direction of the prime minister to a certain extent. So it's like another level of executive branch.
All right. Well, all right. Let's take into consideration that she was more or less a Churchillian type of person, because she was around in and around that time when Churchill was over there running things.
Pretty
And
much.
she's that old world diplomat, so to speak. But if you look at the rest of England and what the hell is going on over there, I'm like, I don't know. I just, we fought 2 wars to get away from that system of doing stuff. And I understand that this is their figurehead, and I feel bad that they're all upset. But what I also don't understand is this. I don't understand the whole royal thing. It's a family. It's just it's a bloodline. They are no better or worse than anybody else.
No, they're different. They're very different.
It doesn't mean anything. It doesn't mean a damn thing.
But it does. Just like people in America are praise the Kardashians or whatever celebrity is popular. To them, it is taking that to the
all right
level.
Then that right there just proved my point.
What?
That just proved my point entirely. Because the world does not need another Kardashian. The world does not need another Hilton.
But you're taking it from the negative aspect. I'm talking about the positive aspect. They have the celebrity. They have political power, and they wield it, and they are able to influence the world if it's done properly.
That's where their role really is.
Yeah,
is more on the foreign stage than it is on the domestic stage. Domestically, it's mostly the prime minister. Foreignly, it will be whoever the reigning monarch is, which now will be King Charles III. Until she passed, it was Queen Elizabeth, and she was the face to foreign diplomacy. Probably more so than the prime minister is.
Well, I'll give an example to put it in perspective. We go to the president goes to Japan. They meet the prime minister, like Prime Minister Abe. We went to Sudan. We talked to the king and the crown prince. We're talking to their royal family. When we go to other nations and we're talking to the figurehead, the person who's running that nation, that's always in England. That's always going to be the monarch. They are the same role on that international diplomatic level of a prime minister, of a king, of any elected official around the world. That's England's monarchy.
Yeah, well, maybe I'm just too used to the fact that I think I should have some input into who the hell's leading me, rather than following somebody's bloodline because their family has got deeper roots than mine.
No, it's an American view, and that's perfectly fine. I agree. I love America. I have no problem with it. But I can recognize, and because King Charles is now in, it affects international politics in a significant way.
Oh, well, I anticipate it all going to shit. Well, I anticipate everybody at the UN next week running around with a little baseball hat with a solar panel on the top of it and a windmill sticking out of their ass to generate electricity over there because of all of his green initiatives that he wants to deal with.
And we're going to see England focus
on that. They pop all the glass out of Buckingham Palace and install solar panels over there. Then I think they should talk about leading the world in their green energy crap.
Until then,
him and the queen consort just need to and go off on a fox hunt somewhere and stay the hell out of things.
You'll be surprised. You're going to see a lot of things change, especially when it comes to green energy. There is going to be a new focus coming out of England, at least. And the rumor is that he will resign to give the position to his son, William, that William can take in. And William is whereas King Charles is more of an environmentalist. To the best of what we know, Prince William is more in line with his grandmother, Queen Elizabeth, being more conservative and more civic minded in that manner.
I don't know, but as Jan asks, with some of their holdings, let's just call it their holdings, on a band, and let me tell you something about Australians. They gave up their guns without a fight. I don't think they're going to look for their sovereignty. I think the Australians have pretty much capitulated the last shred of dignity and freedom that any of them had left during COVID. The last thing I think they're going to do is want to pick a fight with England 1,800 miles away across the pond.
Well, they do hold some sovereignty. Okay, just like Canada. Canada's still actually a part of the crown.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, however, they do act primarily independently of the crown, and they have their own prime minister, just like Australia has their own prime minister.
Well, Canada acts independently of the crown because they know that they got their big brother one level below that border that's going to make sure that their safety is always going to be guaranteed. Australia's got to be pretty much fending for themselves out there in the middle of the ocean on that one big giant island. Whether or not they decide that they want to be free of English monarchy completely and be, completely self-determining, that's yet to be seen. But I don't see a lot of the people in Australia really having the gumption to even think that when for the last 25 years, they've given up every ounce of freedom they have to the government they already have.
But we are seeing that in many of the territories like Jamaica, several parts of the world that still are under the British rule, that are making the move towards independence. And they've been saying that very vocally in the last year. And so what we're looking at is if King Charles or Prince William, whichever may continue to move forward, and I think it may be a mix of both in the near term, if they are not able to maintain the United Kingdom and its empire, then we're going to see these individual nations separate, fail, and fall to socialism, which is normally the process that we've been seeing recently, which means global stability will decrease, which will endanger the lives of American citizens. This is how this is important to America. It's something that most people do not think of. And Dow, I think, I know Dow's been overseas. I've been overseas. A lot of people see it when you have lived overseas. You start to see how some of these things are very important down the road about how the dominoes will fall. If they cannot maintain the English rule as it is, we will see greater global destabilization, and we will see greater conflict in the world, which will be bad for every American everywhere in the world. We want King Charles and Prince William to hold it together and do at least half as well as Queen Elizabeth if we want a stable world and safe Americans.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing is, if all of them do decide that now is the time to jump ship, so to speak, that will create a lot of turmoil on the world stage. A huge amount of turmoil and chaos.
Yeah.
So we do need to be mindful of that. I want to start off tonight, and obviously we started off with the Queen, but I got I was going through my Facebook feed and I ran across something in my Facebook feed that was kind of interesting. Let me find it here. Okay. Let me pause that and we'll go ahead and do a share. Okay. As everybody knows, Pfizer is one of the main manufacturers of the COVID vaccine. Okay, and right, is this it?
Boy, that's funny. As soon as I have the YouTube streaming next to me on the other monitor, as soon as you said the word Pfizer, it started buffering over there on YouTube.
Of course it did. Of course it did. So this week in my Facebook feed, I saw this video about misinformation. And lo and behold, it was being published by Pfizer.
Hey there, and
It's called
welcome
I
to the
Heard
lab
It
where
On
we
Here.
knock down all the rumors the internet throws at us. On the screen today is a question around how well getting vaccinated against COVID-19 helps the body fight against the Omicron variant. So, as you may be aware, the Omicron variant is the most mutated variant of concern today. It contains over 30 different mutations, which may give the virus the ability to escape immune protection from vaccination or past infection. Recent data has shown that most people who have completed a COVID-19 primary series vaccination still have some level of protection against COVID-19 caused by the Omicron variant, including helping to protect against severe disease for those who get infected. Although getting vaccinated against COVID-19 isn't a promise you won't ever get infected, it is intended to help protect against COVID-19 and severe disease and complications if you do get infected. So, staying up to date with vaccinations based on the latest recommended vaccination schedule is important. Even with an aggressive virus like COVID-19, we find ways to fight it. We just have to believe in the science.
Okay, so I'm going to pause it right here. This video is intended for U.S. residents only, and it's intended to be viewed as it was originally produced by Pfizer. The information provided is for educational purposes only and is not intended to replace discussions with a healthcare provider.
Mike, you said education. I think you meant indoctrination.
Yeah, pretty much.
I'm reading off what they said.
I know.
Keywords U.S. only. Why? Because other countries are rejecting. As an example, in the United States, there it is still recommended that pregnant women must get the jab. But like in the UK and many other nations, they're like, you're out of your mind. No, pregnant women do not get the jab, and they can't get the jab. It's restricted from them because of the untested nature of the product.
So I want to kind of go over some things here. Why this is so ironic and hypocritical. Okay. Prior to this live stream, I was doing some research, and here's what I found on some of my research. Okay, where is it? No.
Yeah, that was funny. I just saw that too.
There it is.
That was funny.
Okay. So, Pfizer, this website is called corpresearch.org. It's a corporate research project. And this is what they have on Pfizer. Okay. So, Pfizer itself is the largest pharmaceutical company in the world, in large part by purchasing its competitors. In the last dozen years, it has carried out 3 mega acquisitions. Warren Lambert in 2000, Pharmacia in 2003, and Wyeth in 2009. Then in 2015, Pfizer announced a $160 billion deal to merge with Allegra. and moved its headquarters to Ireland to avoid U.S. taxes, but subsequently had to abandon the plan. Okay. So, product safety. During the mid 80s, Public Citizen Health Research Group charged Pfizer's widely prescribed arthritis drug, Feldene, created a high risk of gastrointestinal bleeding. Okay. The federal government declined to put restrictions on that medication. In 96, an article in Progressive about Fedline was headlined Death by Prescription. The FDA expressed greater concern about reports of dozens of fatalities linked to heart valves made by Pfizer in 1986. In 1991, the FDA task force charged that Shilly had withheld information about safety problems from regulators. Shilly is a subsidiary of Pfizer. Regulators in order to get initial approval for its valve, and that the company continued to keep the FDA in the dark. On November 7th, 1991, investigation in the Wall Street Journal asserted that Shilly had been deliberately falsifying manufacturing records relating to the valve fractures. Okay, and that led to a $205 million settlement to settle tens of thousands of valve lawsuits. In 2004, Pfizer announced that it had reached a $60 million class action lawsuit brought by users of Resolin, a diabetes medication developed by Warner Lambert, which had withdrawn it from the market shortly before the company was acquired by Pfizer in 2000. In 2004, in wake of revelations of dangerous side effects of Merck's painkiller Vioxx, Pfizer agreed to suspend television advertising related to the medication called Celebrex. The following year, Pfizer admitted that the 1999 clinical trial found that elderly patients taking Celebrex had greatly elevated risk of heart problems. In 2005, Pfizer withdrew another painkiller, Bextra, from the market after FDA mandated a black box warning about the cardiovascular and intestinal risks of the medication. In 2008, Pfizer announced that it was setting aside $894 million to settle lawsuits that had been filed in connection with Bextra and Celebrex. With the acquisition of Wyeth, Pfizer took on a new set of legal problems. Now, most of the lawsuits were product liability cases involving hormone therapy, childhood vaccines, the antidepressant Effexor, the contraceptive Norplant, and most importantly, a combination diet drug known as Fen-Phen, which had been withdrawn from the market after reports that its use was linked to possibly fatal heart valve damage. Okay, those are a few of the drug-related suits. Pfizer's also been in numerous suits involving price manipulating. And we have advertising and marketing controversies, basically where Pfizer was claiming something that wasn't true. Most of this is misleading advertising, and Pfizer has submitted these videos on misinformation. I kind of question those videos. Now, here's where it gets really interesting. In 1976, Pfizer was one of the many companies that disclosed that it made questionable payments to foreign government officials. The company said that about $265,000 had been paid to officials in 3 countries, but did not identify them. In 2012, the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission announced that it had reached a $45 million settlement with Pfizer to resolve charges that its subsidiaries, especially Wyeth, had bribed overseas doctors and other healthcare professionals to increase foreign sales.
That was from the SEC.
The SEC, yes.
All
They've
right,
also
again,
got
it's pushing public.
labor, worker safety, tax problems. I mean, all the way around, Pfizer's got problem after problem after problem, and they're going to lecture us on misinformation. Pfizer's one of the biggest people on misinformation, with all their product safety that they've misled people on, and their straight out advertising and market controversy where they've misled people on various products.
I got to cut
I-
out for a couple minutes, guys.
I just want to say that Pfizer is known for their how do I put this? Be mildly PC. They're known for dealing with dicks.
Well,
Well, that was their breakout drug. I remember that back in '99 when they found out that their heart medication actually worked in an entirely different part of the
Wrong organ.
It was back when I was a stockbroker. God, we loved when that came out. It was a heyday, and God, it was a moneymaker. But
well,
are we surprised that a pharmaceutical company is taking advantage of the political pandering and fear mongering that we are seeing coming from the government?
Absolutely.
no,
not.
absolutely not. But I do, and like I said, we're here to bring attention to this type of stuff. Okay, and this is very much political in nature, and the very fact that they're doing these videos, like the one that I just put up, shows how they are actually trying to manipulate anything that could be considered controversial to their thing. Now, in 2009, actually in September 2009, the Justice Department announced the largest healthcare fraud settlement in its history. Pfizer paid $2.3 billion for fraudulent marketing. American Pharmaceutical Giant Pfizer Incorporated and a subsidiary, Pharmacia Upjohn Company, herein together, Pfizer, have agreed to pay $2.3 billion, the largest healthcare fraud settlement in the history of the Department of Justice, to resolve criminal and civil liability arising from the illegal promotion of certain pharmacological products. Pharmacy Upjohn Company has agreed to plead guilty to felony violation of the FDA's Food, Drug, and Cosmetic Act for misbranding Brextra with the intent to defraud or mislead. Brextra is an anti-inflammatory drug that Pfizer pulled from the market in 2005 under provisions of the FTC Act. The company must specify the intended use of a product and its new drug application to the FDA. Once approved, the drug may not be marketed or promoted for so-called off-label uses. So right there, okay, is another smoking gun of Pfizer misleading the public.
I don't think it's Pfizer, though. It's not Pfizer. It's the government. They're just taking advantage of the opportunity that exists. Now, you can say that they've done lots of things that have been, and as a former stockbroker, I followed this company since the 90s. And yes, they've done things that are duplicitous, that are incredibly questionable, if not highly illegal. Absolutely. But then again, so is Merck. So is every other major pharmaceutical company. The thing is, when we're looking at what's going on today and what will be going on in the future, it is the fact that we have a government that is so intent on fear-mongering, with a news media that is so intent on making sure people obey and allowing the government to micromanage their lives, that corporations are seeing a window of opportunity and they are being used as a tool of that opportunity to be able to sell their wares, and they win because the public you're being micromanaged to death. The government saying, we're going to micromanage your health. By the way, we're going to use this pharmaceutical company to do it. And if it wasn't Pfizer, it was going to be J&J, or it's Merck, or it's one of the others. And there's our problem. Ultimately, the biggest problem for me, and this is just me, isn't the pharmaceutical industry. They are a symptom. They are a tool. My biggest problem comes that there are individuals in our government who have used fear to enable them to micromanage our health care and our lives, and have convinced the public that the final say about our individual lives lies with the government and not ourselves. And there's my problem. That's me.
I agree. Okay. And I'm also of the opinion that there really shouldn't be as many laws on the books as there is. Okay. That if somebody has a something is wrong, if somebody is wronged by something, then they should be able to seek compensation and recompense for that alleged wrong.
Mhm.
Okay, whatever that is. Many of the laws that are on the books are actually designed to help businesses like Pfizer stay in power while undermining any businesses that may be able to compete with Pfizer, thus setting up monopolies, duopolies, and basically this control over segments of our industries, of various industries. We see that time and time again in the communications industries, where you have cable companies that essentially in an area you have one choice. And a lot of areas for internet service, you have one choice, maybe two. Phone service, you basically have one choice, maybe two. Cellular service, there are four main choices in the United States. Okay. One of the four choices, or actually two of the four choices, are actually in the process of merging if they haven't already merged. So now we're actually down to three main choices as far as cellular service goes.
Mhm.
We're seeing it in the social media realm, where essentially you have the big three. You have YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter. Any other social media really isn't weighing in there. Okay, I mean, we have TikTok coming to the fold. Instagram's owned by Facebook. Okay, so really there isn't owned by Facebook. There isn't a lot of competition in the social media realm. And that's because of the way things have been allowed to be manipulated and the way that certain government regulations are in place. Okay. And like I said, we're seeing it across many, many industries. And primarily the tech industry has learned how to take advantage of this to extremes, where the tech industry is basically able to get a monopoly on things very quickly.
Right. No, I get that. I mean, we've seen a lot of monopolies, and part of the thing, this kind of makes me think of Article 230, that we're seeing monopolies, but the government is backing, that they're pushing and using these monopolies at the disadvantage of the public. I mean, we just heard today, Joe Biden's coming out saying, oh, we're going to get strict with Article 230. Yeah, except he leaves out the fact, and the news media is leaving out the fact that traditionally, going back to 2020, actually 2017, we're seeing that the Democrats want more censorship and not less. They want
Exactly.
They want to protect Pfizer. They want to protect their micromanaging of people's health by instituting a ministry of truth, not just on the government level, not just on the side with the FBI talking to Facebook and Mark Zuckerberg and Twitter, but directly mandating by law that they have to censor the public whenever the public says something that they don't like. I mean, we've seen that with Senator Dianne Feinstein, Senator Coons, Senator Blumenthal have all said they want to increase the censorship to allow Pfizer and the social media giants to enable the government to micromanage our lives. This is terrifying.
Watch this. Unfortunately, sometimes we have to pull a comment or can't respond. Here is why. Your comment references a product, ours or someone else. While we do not endorse any user's comments other than our own, we still have to be mindful of the important regulations that govern our industry. If you post references to a pharmaceutical brand from any company, positive or negative, we will need to remove it because, among other reasons, we can't guarantee that it will represent fair balance.
That's funny.
Your comment references a side effect. If your post includes possible side effects associated with Pfizer product, we may be required to contact you for further information. You may contact us to report an adverse event related to Pfizer products by calling 1-800 blah blah blah. Or if you prefer, you may contact the FDA directly. Please visit www.fda.gov/medwatch or call 1-800-FDA-1088. Non-U.S. citizen, ask your healthcare provider.
Yeah, but wouldn't you think they would want people to be, if they are contacting them about potential side effects of their drugs, that they have instant access to the public to follow this up and say, oh my God, we're getting direct information. Let's follow this up to make sure it's credible, to make sure that our product is working properly so we can get back to the FDA and help people around the world. Wouldn't you want to encourage or at least acknowledge that people, because most people don't know how to contact the FDA or where to report side effects. They don't know. So they're going to speak to a drug maker themselves, and they should not remove the comment. They should use that as a resource. But instead, they're like, no. That may affect our ability to allow the government to micromanage your life and therefore cut our funding. How dare you? That's
how many lawsuits did I just read through that were on Vitus were about side effects of Pfizer drugs that they actually intentionally withheld from the public?
Yeah, and there's many more. There's more than what you just.
Oh, I know there are. Those are the largest ones.
Yeah, but it's the entire industry. As a former broker, I'm very familiar. It's the entire industry.
It is. It's not just Pfizer. I do agree with that. Okay. The biggest reason why I'm picking on Pfizer is I'm hearing a bunch of clicking from somebody. It's like banging.
Wash. Yeah. Was that me?
I don't know. It's like somebody's tapping on a 10 or like loading a magazine right next to a microphone or something.
Okay. Well,
but anyway, the biggest reason why I'm nailing Pfizer is because of that video that I found in my stream.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Okay. That's why Pfizer's being targeted. Okay. They talk about misinformation, but they are one of the biggest people that cause misinformation and have benefited from misinformation that they have perpetrated themselves.
Sure.
Okay. That's why Pfizer's being targeted tonight. I know Moderna does the same thing. I know Merck does. I know all of them do.
Well,
Okay.
no, I'm just making sure the public, we're talking to everyone. I'm just trying to make sure they don't think, oh, it's just Pfizer. Those. No, don't single it out. For the rest of the public, we're talking about one example. It's an industry-wide thing, and they all fall under this umbrella.
Mm-hmm. Oh, absolutely. Okay, and they've all hidden side effects that were detrimental to their drug that if would have been known when the drug was authorized by the FDA, it would never got that authorization. But we're also finding out that the FDA is actually authorizing a lot of drugs with some very harmful side effects just because of who is submitting them to be authorized.
Yeah, it's incredible. But I think that one of the things going forward that's going to be very important, because now we are looking at under the Biden-Harris administration, Democrats are more heavily relying on the WHO, which is directly tied on many levels to the pharmaceutical industry on a global level.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. And so we're not getting immediate or honest answers as they direct our healthcare now and in the future. And if you couple that, and my big thing is the Article 230 aspect of it, that we are looking at, they're about to usher in more censorship to enable them to be able to sell us bad products, mandate bad products or questionable products or products that are untested on the American people and globally as well. And that's, besides, I would call it evil. Let me just say it's evil because of the impact that has for generations. This is terrifying times.
Okay. So, just to dig into that, I'm pulling up something here real quick. Okay, because like you said, the WHO is essentially controlled by many of these companies. And I'm trying to find on their website, they have a list of who all sponsors them or pays into them.
They've got to have a huge impact from, I would think it would be Merck, Bayer, AG, Merck, Bayer, J&J, Pfizer, and Biotechnica. And probably, I would guess, the top 7 out of 10. And they're in that top 7 list.
Okay, partnerships and collaborations. That's what I was looking for.
Am I right? Should be Bayer because they're German.
Oh, I know Bayer's in there. I know Pfizer's in there.
J&J, Moderna, Biotechnica, and there's someone else I'm forgetting right now. Merck.
Merck's in there.
Mm-hmm.
I know there's a literal list of all the companies and stuff that are a part of this. Not finding it right now. Any other time I'd be able to pull right up.
Of course.
It's hiding.
Of course it is. Partners. There we go. This is what I'm looking for, I think.
AstraZeneca. Dow, that's.
There you go, Dow. Mhm.
I knew there was someone I was just couldn't remember. AstraZeneca's it. But they're the big ones, and it scares me that. And they tried this with monkeypox. Polio is back, and they're trying to sell us all these drugs that are being mixed together that have never been mixed before. Many of them because they're still in experimental stages. I mean, the process is normally on a fast track, a 7-year process to determine that something is healthy for human beings to consume. And now we want to mix these experimental drugs with drugs that have been tested, like the monkeypox vaccine, which is basically the smallpox vaccine. We have no idea how these things interact with each other. And they were trying to have multiple doses of this, something that's not been done before. We've never seen that. Where what happens when you just repeatedly, under a short-term period, just keep pumping the body full of these artificial medications, what happens to that body? I mean, we're still studying, and many doctors, many studies are saying might just lower your overall ability to fight everything and anything. And yet they want to pump out more, and they're putting together legislation that says, and the next time that we decide that something is a pandemic or endemic, you're going to get pumped full of even more drugs.
Mhm.
This is a heyday for the pharmaceuticals.
It is. Okay, and here's the thing on all this, and I can't find what I was looking for. It used to be that we wanted our kids to be exposed to various diseases. Okay, we didn't want them to feel sick necessarily. We didn't want them to be in harm's way. Hello, Lindsay, and welcome to the show. But we did want them to have some exposure because that helped build their natural immunity, not a chemically dependent immunity. Now, there are obviously some diseases, smallpox for one, polio, and others, that it's not so good for people to actually get those. But for the most part, unless you're elderly or have some severe immunosuppressive issues or other care issues, getting the flu isn't necessarily going to kill most people. Okay, though a lot of people do die from the flu, but they generally have other health issues. And for them, yeah, I highly recommend that they get the flu vaccine. However, more often than not, the flu vaccine that's put out there isn't for the flu that's actually going around.
That was for the last flu.
Okay, now we're hearing on the vaccine for COVID that initially it was supposed to be 96% effective at stopping COVID. That's what we were told. That's what was advertised.
Yeah.
Okay, it was supposed to stop COVID.
Supposed to.
Now, as they started seeing more and more quote unquote breakthrough cases of COVID, their story started changing.
Yeah, the definition.
And now it was the vaccine won't necessarily keep you from getting COVID, but it will make it so it's not as severe. And we're coming to find out, and there's more and more studies coming out, that isn't necessarily the case either. let's see, I think it was last week or the week before in California, 41% of COVID related deaths were people that were vaccinated. And almost
Interesting.
50% of COVID deaths were people that were vaccinated.
You know,
Mhm.
and we just say that if they have to change the definition of a medical procedure or anything, that whatever they're changing to fit their political ideology and to enable the government to have more power, that whatever the definition is changed to isn't real. You know, when you change the definition, whether it's changing the definition of what is a man, the opposite of a woman, what's a woman, the opposite of a man, that's not a definition, that's a political statement. Let's throw that out. It's not real. When you say a vaccine no longer prevents and eliminates a certain disease and instead reduces the strength of that infection, that's not a vaccination. Let's
No.
throw that out. That's a political statement. We should, as a nation, say these things, and we should not be censored for having to say that because, you know, at the end of the day, no one is mandated. And see that this is the problem I have with what Pfizer is doing with their video. With many of them are doing with their videos, buying time on this news stations so that they are embedded with these organizations, so that they have a financial interest in pushing this message. Besides the political one, is the fact that they make it sound like, well, if I say that I don't like something or I have a question or I have a reservation about it, well, that's suddenly they're equating me with the ability of a doctor or a scientist and saying, well, you can't say that. Why not? If you're telling everyone that they need to talk to the healthcare professional, which I agree with, then there should be no problem unless you assume that everyone that is listening is a moron, cannot independently think for themselves, and do not come up with their own brilliant idea of, hey, maybe I should ask my doctor.
Well,
No.
let's pause on that for just a second. Let me bring up some things. How many doctors did we see lose their license because they talked out against the narrative of COVID? How many nurses did we see get fired because they talked out against COVID and the practices?
New York State, 34,000. I personally interviewed in 4 different protests in the Southern Tier several dozen doctors, some on air, live video, some behind the scenes, several dozen. Every single one of them have been fired and lost their jobs. And healthcare has taken a downturn in the Southern Tier and in New York State as a direct result of it.
Okay. And we saw this repeat across the nation because they didn't go along with the quote unquote governing body, the CDC and the FDA. Okay. The CDC has made
I would just like to ask the last person who heard from Fauci was.
Actually, Fauci was in the news this week.
Yeah, he's got to
finally showed up.
Well, he's got to give his documents to a court because they're investigating his connection, along with the press secretary of the United States, Jean-Pierre, that they colluded with social media companies to hide facts from the public and to censor the public. They've got 20 days to get that document to the court.
Interesting. And then once my group wraps up, I want to talk about one of Dal's comments.
Okay, now the CDC. Okay, this is August 17th, 2022. CDC. I'm going to go ahead and share this. So give me just a second to get it up here. CDC director announces shakeup, citing COVID mistakes.
Huh. Mistakes. I love
I
that.
saw that.
Okay. I don't know what they are calling mistakes, but basically they're saying that they handled COVID wrong. And essentially they're talking about completely reorganizing the CDC. Okay, there's been other things come out about how the CDC got things wrong, not just in the handling, but in the actual treatment recommendations that they were making. Okay, many of these treatment recommendations that they were making, that they were getting wrong, doctors were trying to call those out, and doctors were being fired for it. They were losing their licenses because they were talking out against these missteps of the CDC.
Yeah, and no one's replacing their jobs. No one's replacing their incomes. No one's the impact to millions of people's health care has negatively been impacted, and no one is getting restitution for that because you can't. It's too widespread. And that's the problem that you get when you decide to use science on a weekly basis, trying to make it in time for the next election, rather than allowing scientists to do the research and then come up with a plan, because you can't do this on a daily basis. Well, today we decide that it's something brand new, just in time for that next election, because you got to vote for us. Oh, we got to change your answer again. Why? Because we got the election and it's coming down the line, and you've got to listen to us because we want your vote. You can't run healthcare like that, but that is what we're doing now. They're making the CDC subservient to the WHO, who didn't get it right in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so, and you remember how there was so much talk about ivermectin? Okay, and how it was supposedly ineffective against COVID. Okay.
Careful. Wait a minute. Before we go further with that, we are not recommending anyone take any medication that is not approved by a doctor. We do recommend that you speak with your healthcare professional.
Exactly.
We are not medical professionals.
No,
nor
we are not.
giving healthcare advice. We are addressing issues that are already in the news media and have already been discussed for the YouTube censors. Please make sure you pay attention to that part. Go on. I'm sorry. Just want to cover our asses.
Needed.
Right. And no, we do not recommend, okay, any medical advice, and we are not giving medical advice. Any medical advice needs to come from a medical professional. We are not medical professionals. Okay. So, there was literally over 180 studies done on ivermectin. And of those studies, it basically showed that 180 ivermectin COVID-19 studies, and I'll go ahead and share this. Ivermectin COVID-19 studies, 130 peer-reviewed, 90 comparing treatment and control groups. Ivermectin has been officially adopted for early treatment in all or part of 22 countries, 38 including non-government medical organizations. Essentially, they came out that ivermectin actually has caused up to a 75% decrease in death and mortality associated with COVID. when used early in the treatment of COVID. Okay, and this here is a list of all those studies. Okay, this one was done in Pakistan, showing lower mortality, lower ICU admission, and faster viral clearance with treatment with ivermectin. And basically, like I said, it goes down. It goes all the way through on this and shows all the studies that were related to ivermectin. 39 exercise studies show 44% lower COVID mortality with a history of higher physical activity, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. So some of these early things with ivermectin that the CDC and the National Institutes of Health and et cetera were coming out with, saying that ivermectin, there was no proof ivermectin worked, and blah 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 blah, when there were real world doctors that were seeing the results in front of their eyes of how ivermectin was improving the outcomes of their patients. And the CDC and the National Institutes of Health were, because it was popular amongst Trump supporters, were lambasting ivermectin without any studies or anything to really give them any evidence that ivermectin was actually dangerous when used in the treatment of COVID. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, these are the things that we're talking about. Okay. Just because the CDC is a part of the United States federal government does not mean that they know.
Nor should they make policy.
They shouldn't.
Which is really terrifying that we allowed a group of functionaries in a department of the government to suddenly impose legislation, mandate our lives. They were never elected. It wasn't a law, but yet because individuals like Dr. Fauci would come on any given day and suddenly decree that he felt like something was beneficial because he was science, and you didn't dare question science, even though science is the pursuit of questions. And then he had the power, even seemingly even beyond the president or the Congress, to affect our lives. That's our first mistake. We allowed this functionary to assume a power over the public that is nowhere in the Constitution. It is nowhere in our legislation and should never be allowed. And now they're doubling down on that, saying, well, if the WHO says it's whatever, then that's the answer. And you, American citizen, must follow the WHO. They've got nothing to do with America. How dare you say I have to follow everything they say blindly without question because some functionary in another extra governmental organization says, well, this is the answer today. No, never.
And here's the real funny thing about it. Okay, CDC, more often than not, most of the doctors that are with the CDC don't see a patient. A lot of the people that were making these recommendations never saw a patient. National Institutes of Health, again, it's been over 30 years since Fauci saw a patient.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, come on. These are people that are giving us recommendations that weren't dealing with the actual disease while it was progressing through patients. And we're coming to find out that a lot of the information, a lot of the advice, and a lot of the stuff that was given out by the CDC, by the WHO, by the National Institutes of Health were wrong treatment programs that were causing people to go on innovators, that were causing people to go on being hospitalized and so forth because they were treating it wrong. And countless doctors tried to come out and say, you're treating this wrong. And as a result, they lost their licenses.
And they will not get them back now that many of them have been proven to be correct or even potentially correct. They're not going to bring back the lives that were lost. And we have seen that as a consequence of this, 16,000 in part of this, 16,000 people in New York State died, 4,000 people in Michigan died, approximately 8,000 people in California died. That's just the ones that I know on the top of my head that will not be discussed by the government, will not be discussed by the news media. And if you dare to go beyond what I've just said about that, you'll be shut down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I will be honestly surprised if we do not get shut down because of this video.
Try not to.
Okay. I mean, I honestly will be surprised. Okay. But the thing is this information is out there if people want to look for it. Okay. And I tried got into a discussion with somebody earlier this week. Okay, and it was typical Facebook discussion. And actually, this guy actually did have some good comments. I'm not going to deny that. But he had some very wrong information.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. He tried to come out with that the smallpox vaccine, people were still getting smallpox with smallpox vaccine. No.
What? No.
No. Smallpox was eradicated because of the smallpox vaccine.
Virtually eradicated. There's still, it's kind of like polio. It still exists in a couple of third world nations.
Okay. But essentially, I mean, the WHO has declared it eradicated. In the United States, we haven't seen smallpox case in decades.
Mm-hmm.
Now, given that, okay, the smallpox vaccine was extremely effective at stopping the disease.
Yes.
Not preventing severe effects of the disease, but stopping the disease.
You mean being a vaccine?
Yes. Okay. Now, let's go into polio vaccine. Early on with polio vaccine, the vaccine was actually responsible for more cases of polio than the natural disease was. However, they moved beyond that. Okay, they figured out what they did wrong, and instead of using an attenuated live virus for polio, they actually used a dead viral component to make the polio vaccine. And as a result, the polio vaccine was highly effective. Now we're starting to see here in New York some cases of polio starting to pop up. And the reason why is because we haven't been vaccinating people against polio for some time. Okay. Mm-hmm. There are many diseases that are literally stopped by vaccines. Okay. You get a vaccine, and once you're vaccinated, you're not going to get it. Or if you do get it, it is extremely, extremely rare. Not with the COVID, quote unquote, vaccine. Okay. They are saying that literally, even with the vaccine, you're more than likely going to get COVID.
Which means it's not a vaccine in any traditional sense until they change the definition.
You know, I also have a real hard time with it. Okay, in that they're using this new technology, which right up until the quote unquote COVID vaccine, every clinical test that they put in for this mRNA technology to be used for various programs, cancer vaccines, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Every clinical study that they put in for was denied. Then all of a sudden with COVID, now all of a sudden mRNA technology is the best thing ever. Okay, except it's ineffective. It hasn't worked. It's not stopping people from getting COVID. It's not stopping people from dying. It's not stopping people from being hospitalized.
Well, there's not much to be expected with a drug that was created essentially overnight and jabbed into the bodies forcefully of most Americans and people worldwide.
We're still in first phase testing.
To see what happens in about 10, 15 years to the human race.
Well, I'm terrified of that, but the fact is, this is essentially the first phase of testing as compared to any other drug process that would normally go on. We've introduced human trials in the first phase of testing.
Yeah.
And that doesn't bode well to consequences.
No.
It doesn't.
That's the
So I want to go ahead, Mike, but when you're ready, I want to step back to that comment to Dal I was talking about earlier.
Go ahead. Whatever comment you're.
I'm referring to the comment where he talks about the involvement of, it's right here, as is AstraZeneca, Merck, Bayer, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Okay. Correct me if I'm wrong. I read up on it. I may be inaccurate. So, if I remember right, Bill Gates, the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation had ties to and money in the lab in Wuhan, correct?
multiple labs throughout the world.
Okay. And what was it like a year or two, a couple years before, Bill Gates goes on and he's like, the world's not ready for a pandemic. It was, I don't remember how many years before it was. And he just specifically keeps talking about the world's not ready for a pandemic. And I can find a link to the video where he talks about it. And then it was within no time at all that COVID hit.
Yeah.
And so Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation ties in. All of a sudden, there's COVID. They're tied into, because they're tied into Pfizer as well, aren't they?
As well as it's part of his holdings.
So I don't know. There's just way too many things that not enough of Americans are going, hey, wait a second. They're just ignoring it because they're blindly following the science.
Well, because people are not supposed to think anymore. How many times I say it all the time? We're told to obey. Don't question, obey. Government is smarter than the individual. They can micromanage your life better than you can live it.
Conform, consume, obey.
Yeah. And that's terrifying to me. Especially, and I think part of the reason why that's working is because people are afraid of the punishment that we are seeing being enacted whenever someone speaks up. Because we're having this discussion, we are in danger of having this channel and probably all the channels associated being wiped out. That we will be unpersoned on the internet and denied our right to be able to speak to our fellow Americans and people around the world because we have dared to ask a question and wondering about what might be the answer to that question. And because we are thinking rather than just simply obeying, we are being persecuted. And people are looking at this going, while we're on there, they're saying, this is great. I'm glad someone is going to speak about this. And they're also saying, oh my God, I don't want to be the person who's going to be punished. I don't want to be the one who's going to be unpersoned.
I've been unpersoned on Facebook already.
Oh, I have too. It's happened to me multiple times.
Happened to you and me the same time last time.
Yeah, but the average person is looking at that and they're terrified because they're afraid of what does that mean to their life, which I think the opposite answer is correct. The opposite answer should be, no, I'm not afraid. In fact, unperson me. That won't stop me from living my life. It still won't stop me from having my friends. It won't stop me from going to work or doing anything else. All it means is that the government and other institutions are so terrified of a question that they must silence it, which should be the example. And everyone should say, if they're that terrified, then we should ask the question even more.
Well, absolutely.
And that's the thing. If they are trying to stop these questions from being asked, what are they hiding?
Oh, absolutely. But to go back on what Vass said, people, we should be able to just go to work and live our lives anyways. But there are people getting fired left and right because of their stance on COVID and their willingness to speak out about things. It happens all over the country, and it gets hidden when somebody says, I don't agree with this. I don't think that that's the right view, and people lose their jobs over it.
Well, here's the thing. If the rest of the public were just using New York State as an example, since me and Mike are living there, it's a similar answer in other states as well. 34,000 doctors got fired, doctors and nurses. And as Mike was mentioning to me before the show, there's now in North Carolina a new legislation that says you can sue your nurses. So they have liability that they never had before, which is going to drive more nurses out of the marketplace. They're going to drive them out of health care. If the public were to say, wait a minute, you are denying me my health care, my individual choice, my individual health because of a political ideology, and if they voted on that, and I'm not telling you who to vote for whoever the hell you want, I don't care. But if people were to make that a point and say, no, we will not allow you to be reelected or to be elected when you are denying me not only my choice in healthcare, but my ability to access healthcare as I so choose, you know what? That would change. We would see an overnight change. But instead, people are afraid and they're figuring, well, if I don't say anything, it'll get better, which has never happened in the history of the world. Never in the history of the world have a people been oppressed by a government, and by staying silent, it got better. That has never happened in the history of the world. It never
gets worse.
Yeah, it always gets worse.
Absolutely.
Okay, and here's the thing. Okay, what you're talking about is a case in North Carolina that literally overturned a 90-year precedent. I'll go ahead and share it here because I actually have it up, because this is one of the things that I did want to talk about. Okay, there it is. Okay, this is in the Supreme Court of North Carolina in a 3-2 decision, I believe is what it was. They basically said that they were overturning the Byrd decision, which was Byrd versus Marion General Hospital, 202 NC 337, and that was decided in 1932. Basically, that decision categorically established that nurses do not owe a duty of care in the diagnosis and treatment of patients while working under the supervision of a physician licensed to practice medicine in North Carolina. Okay, so they're basically saying that now nurses do, okay, and that they can be held just as culpable as a physician when care is mismanaged in some way, regardless of whether the physician was making those decisions or not. I do agree that on quite a few things. One of the big things on this that I do have to say on this is nurses are the last line of defense for many patients. Okay. They need to be, and in a lot of cases, they are the only voice of the patient because patients can't. Nurses also have not a level as high as doctors should have, but they do have a level of professional medical knowledge. Okay. They also interact with the patients far more than the doctors do, especially when it comes to doctors that specialize, like cardiologists or orthopedics doctors, etc. Okay. Pulmonary doctors. Nurses will have a lot more time with patients, so they know the patients better than most of the doctors do. So as a result, they know a lot more of the background behind the patient. Okay. They know more of the ins and outs of the patients than the doctors do. So along those lines, they need to be able to speak against a doctor's orders when they find those orders are in error. And if they do raise a concern about a particular order or particular drug that's been administered or that's going to be administered, or a particular medical procedure that's going to be conducted, if a nurse raises a question questioning whether or not that is the best course of action, then I agree that that nurse should not be held culpable if the doctor orders to proceed with that particular procedure or medication. However, if a nurse does have an issue or knowingly knows that something is being done in error and they don't raise that question, then I do believe they should be held accountable.
Yeah, but let's think about the consequence of this. Because what they have done is they have increased the liability in our healthcare system. They have put a new pressure on nurses that never existed before. Not to say that maybe there is a level of scrutiny that should be put on nurses that maybe hasn't been before because they become more specialized. But that what it's going to do, and the unintended consequence of this, God forbid, both in North Carolina, and God forbid it's going to be in California, and New York, Illinois, in Maryland, and the rest of the progressive strongholds, and lightning fast. Mark my words, is that this is going to increase the cost of healthcare for the average person, because now nurses have to get the same medical malpractice insurance doctors do. And the number one cause in the last 2 decades in the cost of healthcare has always been, and is number one, is the cost of medical malpractice insurance. And that means the poor are now going to be priced out of even more healthcare choices than ever before. This is going to negatively impact tens of millions of people because they have now said, oh, nurses need malpractice insurance because they're liable. The expectations have been raised and a new burden has been put upon them. And people are going to get hurt because of this. I think they've gone the wrong direction. This is going to be bad.
I can see if we have, now here's the thing, and this is a big if. And here's one of the things that I'm hoping that actually comes from this decision. If we have more nurses advocating for their patients because of potential liability, maybe we will actually save more lives.
Not going to happen. And I'll tell you why. It's not going to happen because for them to be able to do that, not only do they need medical malpractice now, but now you're talking about them because they have advocacy for the patients. You're introducing even further liability in case something goes wrong with that patient on any level. So the administrators of hospitals don't want that burden. And the nurses, for taking on that additional burden and this extra liability that may get them sued, are now going to look for increases in their pay to be commensurate with the risk that they are enduring. Again, this prices out the poor. It means fewer people will be going into that industry because of fear of liability. And the people and fewer are going to get hired because the administrators don't want the extra risk. The people who are in the industry are going to be overworked even more than they have been. The number of healthcare workers, which is already at a detriment of about 1.8 million before, that was in 2019, and that number has only grown, the deficit is going to increase even more. And again, on these levels, because of all of these factors, we are looking at even more of a detriment to the very poor and those in the middle class who are going to be priced out of proper health care. And the ramifications for this in the next 5 years is going to mean that more people will die unnecessarily because of propaganda, administration, and legislation. That terrifies me. Unless you think, does that not make logical sense about what I'm saying?
I do see this causing some issues with healthcare on the nursing front. I agree that there are going to be some issues. But I also, like I said, there are tens of millions of mistakes made each year medically.
Mm-hmm.
And I wonder if some of those could be stopped. Like I said, if nurses were given, maybe not necessarily held liable, but given a means to actually say to a doctor, is that the right course of action, or should we rethink this?
But that can't happen without having more liability on them. They've now introduced a medical opinion on the procedure of a patient care. Therefore, they are liable for whatever happens, whether their advice is followed or not, whether they're right or wrong. And administrators in every hospital is going to say, I need to minimize my risk. And nurses are going to be sued, so they're going to have to take medical malpractice. You inevitably cannot get away from, by having them in any way assume any greater responsibility or advocacy, you must at the same time increase the cost of healthcare and therefore must inevitably price out the poor and even the middle class, making healthcare an elitist only opportunity and destroying millions of lives. It's inevitable. You can't get away from that.
But I also see this because timing is kind of interesting too. If you think about it, because now all of a sudden you're going to start seeing, and I will guarantee over the next 10 years, you're going to be seeing some huge lawsuits coming about from the mismanagement of COVID.
Eventually, Eventually, but that'll be so far down the line. It will be onto another issue, another problem. America's already facing far too many problems. In the next 5 years,
Hmm.
we're looking at the potential of a second civil war. We are looking at the potential of massive riots. Within the next 2 years, we're going to have potentially in certain cities riots about food because there's a 40% food shortage that's about to hit starting in October. And people misunderstand this. And I've been mentioning this in other formats. I want to make sure people are aware. The food shortage is not a winter only problem. It's not a question of can I make it to January or February. The food, 40% less. They're already recognized around the world. There's going to be about 40% less food in the world. 25% of the shelves in the United States are going to be empty. That is a fact. It has already caused Sri Lanka to change its government. There are riots in Eritrea, in Panama, in much of Africa right now because of food shortages. And we haven't even gotten to the food shortage itself. And here's the problem. It's a 1 year process. People are thinking, oh, I just got to make it through the winter. Wrong. If you're only prepping or planning or thinking about this through the winter, you've misunderstood. Because we have to get through the winter, plant the crops have to grow, and then they have to harvest them. You are looking at least a 1 year process, which means a 1 year food shortage. And therefore, that's going to impact millions of lives, not even looking at the fact that inflation on the price of food is going to escalate at the same time that we're looking at worldwide recession, looking at 18% inflation, at least in many countries, first world countries, and the cost of interest rates are going up. So that means your cars, your mortgages, your everything is going up. But just looking at food, so that's the immediate problem. And then we have, at some point, they're going to allow people, they have to change the legislation, but they're eventually going to allow people to do a class action for mistreatment and maltreatment that happened during the pandemic. You're looking at a world of hurt that's coming down the line. And by the time that happens, I don't know where we're going to be at. That terrifies me.
Well, and these people who were so worried about the cost of gas going up a few dollars a gallon have no idea what's in store.
Well, we're not through. Okay, we're not through with gas.
No, we're not. But that's going to be the least of people's concerns when they can't
Everybody
fucking eat
thinks
dinner.
that we've gone over that hump.
No.
Okay, we haven't started into the winter fuel bills yet. The winter fuel consumption.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, when we saw gas prices extremely high, that was when we were just coming out of the winter fuel use.
We hadn't hit peak season yet.
We haven't had a lot of fuel use over the summer because the gas prices were high. That's kind of what drove down prices thus far. You watch come November, December, I figure shortly after the election, you're going to start seeing gas prices start skyrocketing again. And I think they are going to go higher than what we've seen already.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah. There's no way around that. We have already seen Germany, Russia's already shut down Nord Stream 1, which means that Germany and the European Union have to get gas from somewhere. The United States is no longer energy independent. We're competing with the EU and the rest of the world to get gas, which means the price is going up. Saudi Arabia just slapped Joe Biden in the face and said, oh, remember when we increased production by 100,000, which in itself was a slap in his face? They just reversed that. Starting October, that extra production has gone away, which is going to increase prices. At the same time that we're going into the winter, at the same time that Germany needs it, Russia's saying this is political. This is them. They're part of the proxy economic war. They're going to deny that to Europe. This is going to massively escalate the cost of energy in the world. You're not going to be replacing it with solar, wind, geothermal. One, because they can't. Two, because there's not enough of it. This is, I mean, we are looking at a world of hurt coming very shortly. And I don't think anyone's prepared for it because no one's talking about it.
No, we're not. We're absolutely not prepared for it. Okay. I think we're going to see in some places, we're going to see gas prices at the pump pushing $10 a gallon. We're going to see heating fuel pushing $6, $7, $8, $9 a gallon, depending on what fuel it is.
I think that's not far off the.
Your heating bill in the winter, I would say by 2023, 2024, the next winters, not this one coming, will probably more than double.
Okay. This push for green energy. Okay. And I get it. I'm all for finding alternative energy sources. Okay, because honestly, our energy demand is increasing. And I have no problem finding alternative energy sources to supplement our current energy use.
There's only one answer to that, though.
Okay, but we are nowhere in the position to replace our dependence on fossil fuels yet.
Correct.
We just can't do it, period.
Sure.
We don't have the infrastructure in place. We don't have the facilities capable of producing what is needed.
True.
Okay. And secondly, most of the alternative energy sources that they are coming up with, that they're trying to promote, wind, solar being the primary ones, are not reliable.
Yeah, they're inefficient as hell. You know what we need? Nuclear. We need nuclear, which is, guess what? Progressives will never allow it, which is why we haven't built any nuclear plants.
And that's an interesting thing right there. Germany is actually starting back up some of its nuclear plants because of the gas shortage.
Because it's the only reliable and accurate thing. It is the most, literally, it is the most cost efficient process to create energy. And it is also kilowatt for kilowatt, the most clean, realistic.
And it's the most energy dense.
Yeah. We need more nuclear. That's the answer. It's not wind. It's not solar. We need more nuclear.
Okay. I have no problem with wind and solar as supplemental energy sources. And in fact, as far as homeowners go, if you want to put solar panels on your house and put a windmill in your yard or wind turbine in your yard, by all means do it, because that will actually help you. At the very least, it'll make you less reliant upon somebody else for your energy.
Kind of. It's not cost efficient. Here's the problem, and people don't think about this. It sounds like it's a great idea. One, the between the cost of installation and the replacement costs for solar and for wind, it will never be cost efficient, because the solar panels, if you have any kind of weather whatsoever, those solar panels will not make it 10 years. The cost of installation and the cost of replacement, because you can't just dump it into your landfill in your local dump at your local city. You have to go through specific ways, including with wind turbines, even at the individual commercial level. The cost is so expensive to install and maintain and replace that it will never be cost effective on an individual level. People think it will until you start looking at, okay, what is all the cost involved, and then work that out to a 7-year lifespan, which is about average right now. It's not cost effective. This this is the one of the big lies being told to people across this nation. It's not even on an individual level. It is almost never cost effective. We need nuclear. That's the answer. That is the at the moment. I mean, let's continue to research. Let's continue to do the work. We've been looking at solar for 75 years. Still can't make it work. Fantastic. Let's keep going. And if the process means that it's 75 years to make a breakthrough with solar, it means it'll take 30 to 50 years to make everything else work. Fantastic. Keep going through that process. But the answer is nuclear. That's it. Redo the grid and install nuclear power plants. That's it. And to install the new electric grid costs $4 to $7 trillion, which we don't have. And it's going to piss off all the progressives because we have to go through woodlands to install it. Just get it done.
But
that's the only way we can do it.
Vass, it's okay. The federal government can turn on the money machine and make it print more money.
God.
They'll pay for it. No one will suffer for it.
Stop quoting Andrew Yang and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. They are idiots. They have no clue what the hell they are saying. Let's just print money because the Weimar Germany never existed. No one's ever seen what happened to South America, all of it in the 1980s. Yeah, you know, America couldn't possibly become a banana republic. Oh, God help me.
I think it was last week. Dal said the money machine goes brrr.
He said it today, too.
Yeah, there it goes. He just said it just now.
And he's right. And it's like, oh, my God. We're talking about inflation at levels people cannot understand. Mm-hmm. Why are we listening to stupid people? Look, AOC may be a fantastic bartender. She is a miserable congresswoman. And it's not because she's a woman. It's not because she's a Latina. I'm a Latina. Screw you. I don't care about that. It's because she's an idiot. And no one, not even Democrats, have ever supported a damn thing she's ever said because she's an idiot. So is Andrew Yang, which is why no one's ever elected him to anything because he's an idiot. They are trying to sell you these things that sound good, make you feel good, and have absolutely no positive impact on anyone's life. Why are we listening to these people? And then I'll tell you what I really feel like.
Because the government can do anything. It can print money just out of thin air. Didn't you know that? That's how we solve inflation. We just print more money. That's how we solve the deficit. We can print our way out of the deficit. We don't need to be $300 trillion in debt. We just need to print that much money.
Well, this is the solution to income inequality. We're just going to tank the American economy and we'll become a third world nation. So everyone will be fair. Our quality of life will sink down to the level of Zambia. Hello, do you want to be like Zimbabwe? Don't worry, you're going to be whether you like it or not. Hello, Ghana. We're right there with you. Worthless as hell.
Well, I mean, the WEF promoting world equity. So, I mean, and wasn't it the Bush administration that promoted the No Child Left Behind educational system, which took our education from being world class to setting it back to where we teach at the lowest level? We have to teach all of our classes to the level of the worst doing children so we don't leave them behind.
You know what's the latest thing on that same stupidity machine? Did you guys hear about equitable grading? Did you hear about that? I just did a video on this. There was a video. There's in Illinois, a high school in Illinois has been investigating equitable grading. It's something that's being recommended by a bunch of academics out of Harvard. And the answer is that if you have a non-white skin tone, if you are a person of color, you get a new grading system. You have to be graded differently. You have to be treated differently. So your homework being late, that's not a lesson about being able to be responsible and being able to be reliable. No, no, no. You can hand in your homework whenever. Your grades, you can't get a 22. You can't get a 42. You can't get a grade less than 50%, no matter how little you understand the material. And don't worry, we're not going to embarrass you by saying, hey, you have to take a class. You can't take trig. You can't take calculus because you don't understand it. No, no, no. You're going to sit in the same classroom as the kids who actually understand calc and take that same class with them, either taking the kids who are advanced and bringing them down to your level, or just completely losing half, whatever part of the class that doesn't understand that, because we can't treat people differently, even if they happen to be all the same color, because they're trying to do this in LA, where the school district is almost entirely black and Hispanic. But no, because white people are evil. People of color are victims, and the government is going to solve this for you. This is equitable grading. This is going to destroy our school system, and they are trying to implement this now. A piece came out and said, no, 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 they're not, no, Illinois school system is not going to do this in 2023. No, they're planning it for 2024, and some of their teachers are already doing it right now. I did the research on all of this, have all of the sources for this. This is insane. And they're trying to convince us that this is the right thing to do because systemic racism, because black people are less than, and the government will fix this by just ruining our school system. My God, when people say equity anything, they are evil. They are oppressing you, and they are pushing forward this idea that if you happen to be a woman, a person of color, any kind of minority, by whatever description you want to name it, you are inferior, and only the government can take care of your life because you can't figure out how to do it for yourself. I hate this stuff.
Okay, now do affirmative action.
I don't believe it. I don't get rid of it. I don't believe it. I have never believed in affirmative action.
I am lumping those two together. Equitable grading and affirmative action.
They're the same thing. Affirmative action, equal rights for women, feminism right now, critical race theory, every single one of these issues, all of it being equity of some form or another, is de facto stating that someone is less than human and only the government can take care of their lives. I hate it. It's evil. I denounce it all.
And here's the thing. In order to create equity, you must create inequality.
Yes. Yes, it is a definition.
Okay, the two are inversely proportional. When you create more equity, you create less equality.
Yes.
Period.
Correct.
Okay,
Yeah.
So all these people that talk about equality, whenever they mention equity, you can tell right then that they do not want equality.
No.
In fact, they want the exact opposite of equality whenever you talk about equity.
Well, they want to give those particular groups at whatever one they're talking about in that sentence superiority.
No, they
It has
don't.
nothing to do with equity.
No, they don't even want to give. See, they want to give them the my belief, Jeremy, is
Okay.
they want to give them the illusion of superiority.
There you go. That's a good way to put it.
Yeah, because in fact, by definition, anyone who is supporting equality, whether it's social justice, reform, well, I don't care how you want to word it. If you're pushing the idea of equality, you are removing, not equality, equity. Anyone who's pushing the idea of equity is stating that they do not believe in equality. They don't believe in equality of opportunity. They are saying that the individuals that are being affected are less than, They are giving them this illusion of superiority, saying, we will place you above others, therefore destroying equality. But it's only as long as a specific group of elites are in government to maintain that level, to micromanage their lives and every decision in their life. And if that group of elites ever disappear, they will lose this superiority that has been artificially created by government action, and that they have not justified by their actions or the outcomes that come from it.
Well, that's
You
because if
brought
it comes from
up a
an
good point,
individual
Mike.
level, it's classified as racism, sexism, whatever you want to call it. So if the government does it, it's okay. But if you or I or Mike or anyone else does it, it's racist, it's sexist, it's bigoted, it's whatever it is. So it has to be controlled by the government, because then it's okay.
Well, and actually, you both bring up good points. The only way you could ever create equity is via governmental authority.
Yeah.
That's the only way. The only way to create equity is to give more power to the government.
Yeah, that's why it's a socialist staple. It's a staple of socialism and communism, because it's the
Okay.
power of the government.
So-
Always.
Now, if you want to create equality, you remove power from the government.
Yes.
Okay, because and here's what we need to really start looking at. We need to quit looking at equity. Okay, and we need to start looking at equality under the law, where everybody is treated the same, regardless when it comes to the law. Okay, and that means, what that specifically means is that regardless of your position, whether you are an elected official or whether you are a homeless person on the street, you break the law, you both face the same consequences. Okay, what that means is that when government makes laws, it makes laws that treat everyone equally.
And
Okay,
now,
they don't make laws that have quote unquote exceptions. They don't make laws that put one person in a privileged class or a group of people in a privileged class. Okay, that is not equality under the law.
but
Okay, and in the end, it doesn't create equity either, regardless of what people may think. Okay, equity is an illusion. It can never happen. It never will happen. Okay, and for the plain and simple truth of the matter is, if you are striving for equity, there will always be inequity that you have to make up for. Because by creating that equity, you are creating an inequity someplace else.
well, yeah, it's always a balance of the political powers. But by definition, for America to give up, and therefore, as we export these ideas to other countries, infecting those countries, and I do consider it an infection. This is an infectious idea that if we are to try and remove that, you're talking about you'd have to destroy the entire socialist movement. The Democratic Socialists of America would have to cease to exist. The progressive movement would have to end, because they are part and parcel, absolutely dependent on this idea of equity to promote the various groups within their divisions, their splinter groups. And that's the only way they maintain power, by promising X group that you're now going to be elevated. You're going to be the ones who are going to get the free stuff and the privilege and the benefits of them being in power. And the thing about it, when have we ever, as a government, once we have started giving people free stuff, when have we ever stopped doing it? We don't, because politicians get elected on this and reelected on this. Mm-hmm. This is why it's never going to happen. We'd have to destroy the progressive movement, the socialist movement, we'd have to literally eradicate them from American politics. And I just don't see that happening. There's too much money vested in that right now.
Well, and actually, to address true liberals, would look at these werewolves would be gas and such crazy notions ever became mainstream.
Yes.
You're right, Dale. Progressive, and actually progressive, not so much, but liberal and liberalism have been terms that were hijacked.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, because originally liberal people were people that stood for liberty. Okay, and that's where the term liberal came from. Okay, is they wanted liberty. Okay, now there's a movement called libertarianism. Okay, and it actually has been around for a while, but it's not even true liberalism. Okay, true liberalism was actually fighting for liberty, and it meant that in order to obtain that liberty, everybody was treated equally under the law. Government acted generally, not specifically. Okay. Friedrich Hayek, in his book Constitution of Liberty, addresses these points very, very well.
Let me take a step back for a second. Jeremy, I want to ask you a question. How do you feel about the idea that your daughter is going to be rated lower in her classes and her ability to go to college or to have better grades, to get a better education, is now going to be negatively impacted because of the color of her skin? Does that make you feel good as a parent?
No, it makes me feel absolutely awful that she's going to have less of a chance to be graded fairly because of this bullshit scale they're doing. Say goodnight, everybody.
Good night.
No.
Good night.
See, I think every parent in America, and this is going to happen to, and people are going to say, well, what about black people, Hispanics? They're going to get elevated. No, every single group at some point is going to be subjected to the same thing that they want to subject to your daughter, simply because of the color of her skin, and at some point, because there's going to be some other group, I don't know, it's going to be skinny people, fat people, gay, straight, trans, Muslims, Hindus, Zoroastrians, you know.
Let's be honest, though.
Worshippers.
Straight people, white people, Christians, Republicans will never be a protected group.
Okay, well, yes, except for those, every other group is at some point going to also be negatively impacted by this.
That's correct.
Because, I mean, I forgot that all of those groups, which at least a couple of them include me, are devils. And we know this because Joe Biden just told us in his best imitation of the Emperor Palpatine in Philadelphia, straight out of Star Wars, straight out of 1939 Germany, and said it's for the world. Yes, we are going to imperially persecute all these people who disagree with us because they are evil. Here comes Kristallnacht. And I know you guys know what that is. For people who don't know what it is, it's German. Think of the night of broken glass. Look it up. It's historical, and we are right on the edge of that, I believe.
It's historical and it's terrifying.
Terrifying. Does anyone think I'm wrong that we are about to have a Kristallnacht moment in America? That all this stuff put together is putting us on that path, and that we are about to declare at least certain groups of Americans as evil demons that need to be persecuted by the government because Joe Biden and the progressives want to win votes. Am I wrong on that?
No.
And
they are willing to take
we
it to
saw
that
this
extreme.
in the 1930s. Okay.
Yes.
because the Jews were good with business and or actually were claimed to be good business just because they're Jewish. Okay, and the fact was they've been fighting for so long that they learned how to make markets work for them. Okay, and a lot of people thought that they were cheats and everything else. Okay, and that was propaganda being pushed around.
Mm-hmm.
And believe it or not, okay, even here in the United States, there was some very anti-Semitic propaganda being pushed prior to World War II. Okay, and even throughout the war, a lot of that didn't change until after we found out about the concentration camps in Germany. Okay, anti-Semitism was rampant throughout the world in the 20s, 30s, 40s. Okay, and people believe that it wasn't so prevalent, that it was only prevalent in Germany. No, it was global. And we're seeing the same thing happening now with people that have conservative beliefs.
Absolutely.
Yeah. There is so much evil that is happening right now on so many levels. And we have so many problems that have been created because of these evils. And I sit here and I wonder what's going to happen in the next 2 years, guys. The things we've been talking about every week for the last,
The next election, the midterm elections, is going to be very telling.
Oh yeah.
But what, we, according to every estimate out there, and assuming people go out and vote, and I hope to hell that everyone votes. Whomever you're voting for, vote. You hate everyone, vote Mickey Mouse. I don't care. Just vote. Have a reason for your vote.
That's a good candidate.
Not Disney. Not Disney, but you don't like Disney, then put in, I don't know, Roger Rabbit or I don't know, Ariel. I could care less. Just as long as you have a reason, go out and vote. But I am terrified. Republicans will win, most likely, the House and the Senate. Biden's going to be out on the 25th Amendment about a week, maybe 2 weeks after that. Kamala Harris will be 25th Amendment put in his place. We will continue down this same path. And my question comes up to what happens next? What are the Republicans realistically going to do? Are they going to fold again? Are they going to just say, we're going to have a bunch of investigations. This is so wrong. This is so bad. But they're not going to change anything. They're not going to remove these mandates that have happened. They're not going to reverse the trends that have happened because they're afraid of losing the votes they just got. And then what happens?
Well, I do agree. We are going to see a change in the presidency after the midterms. And one of the biggest reasons why is they will want to make it so that Harris is eligible for 2 full terms. So essentially, she will have 2.5 terms if she is reelected 2 more times. Okay. If she's installed prior to the midterm elections, then she's only eligible for reelection once. If she's installed after,
After the women, say it again.
If she is installed after the midterm elections, okay, in other words, after the midpoint of Biden's presidency,
January 2023.
okay, she is eligible for her own 2 terms because this first term would not count.
Right.
If she's seated prior to the midterm of the Biden presidency. then that counts as her first term, and she's only eligible for re-election for one more term.
Really? I thought it was.
Yes.
I know that it was the 2 terms. Once she got in, she would have her chance at 2 terms. But I thought it was. I thought that
If
regardless,
it's
as
prior
long
to
as it's-
midterm, that would count as her first term.
Oh, okay.
If it's
But I know
after
that-
midterm, then it does not count as her first term.
See, I was thinking that they're going to do it after the midterms, and literally, mark my words, I am predicting 2 weeks after the election, they're going to start the 25th Amendment against Joe Biden.
No, they will wait till the next Congress to see it.
Well, no, if they do that, because I don't think that happens.
They have to. They have to wait until after the next Congress to see it. Okay, and
So
actually, they have to wait until after January 6th, 2023.
But see, here's what I'm thinking is, doesn't that process of the 25th, I'm not sure how quickly by enacting the 25th Amendment, is that an immediate process or is that,
It can
I
be
understand
immediate, yes.
it would be immediate. Okay,
Yes,
then yeah,
have to
you're right.
immediate.
Then it would have to be January. Okay.
Okay.
I'm thinking it would take
Depending
time.
on the level of incapacity the president has on how fast it will happen.
Yeah.
Okay. And typically, the 25th Amendment, everything should be expedited and happen as quickly as possible for continuity of governance.
See, and I was thinking that 25th Amendment would go through Congress and therefore it would be delayed because debates, blah, blah. They'd hold it up and it wouldn't actually take place.
Actually, there is nothing that says it has to go through Congress.
Okay. Then that's my misunderstanding of it. And I'm happy to admit that I got it wrong, but because I was thinking
Okay.
that
All that
maybe
has
I'm-
to be shown, all that has to be shown is the president has some sort of incapacity that is preventing him from doing his job. There actually doesn't have to be a vote in Congress.
Okay. I thought they would have to vote or they would debate, well,
No.
he's lucid. Here's the evidence from some doctor, some study, blah, blah. And that would hold it up.
Now, Biden could challenge it,
That's what I'm thinking.
but okay. And if he challenges it, that could drag it out a little bit. But there is actually nothing. There is literally nothing that can actually stop it. There is actually no congressional authority in the 25th Amendment process.
Well,
Let me ask you guys. Go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Jeremy.
the problem is that little bug in his ear is just going to whisper to him, "It's all over, Joe. You had a great term, and now it's time to go home." And he's going to have no fucking clue what's going on.
I actually see Biden just stepping down.
I don't
Or they'll
think
convince him to step down.
I don't think he would want the little shred of what he has of his mental faculties. I think has too much ego. I mean, in politics, no one gets into politics without having a massive ego because
Right.
you can deal with the negativity. And I don't see that ego letting him resign from the position. I just don't see it. They'd have to take him out, which I think they can do and would be justified. I'm just upset that the choice that comes up next is Kamala, someone that 95% of Democrats rejected when they had the opportunity to keep her around. Let me ask you guys this. Something that came up yesterday, as a matter of fact, I was in a different group of Roundtable, and this question came up. Do you think that Kamala Harris, who has already said that she's more than willing to violate our Second Amendment rights by getting rid of your ability to own semi-automatic rifles, do you think she would enact martial law to go and to force and push ahead this socialist movement?
This is how I think she would handle it. Something will happen. Something will be news breaking again. Something George Floyd-esque will happen again. and it will go into riots, and that's when she'll use her power to enact martial law, and will never really come out of it. It'll never be a full recovery once that trigger is pulled. That's how I think it'll happen. But because I agree with you.
Yeah, I could see it like that. What do you think, Mike?
I do believe, and I think we're going to see it in the not too distant future. If we don't see it under this administration, I do think we are going to see it under one of the next two administrations, where something is going to happen in the United States that will be the catalyst for basically shredding the Constitution and putting in a, for lack of a better, an oligarchy or a dictatorship type of deal. And that will be the catalyst for our third Civil War, which a lot of people don't understand, that the Revolution was our first Civil War. That would be the enactment of the third Civil War.
Okay.
And I believe if we go into that internationally, there will be a huge fight over winning America, and I think that's going to be one of the catalysts to basically destroy American sovereignty.
I think that could very likely happen. I could see, and I am terrified. You guys saw that in Chile. They had the world's most progressive constitution ever that was presented to the people. And the people overwhelmingly threw that out the window and said, give us back Pinochet. We want a dictatorship versus having this human rights progressive constitution.
Mm-hmm.
I think that under Kamala Harris, she's going to try and do what BLM and the socialist and the Democratic Socialists have been asking for, the squad have been asking for, is trying to replace much of our Constitution with these progressive ideologies, like what we saw down in Chile. And maybe that's the moment that people are going to notice that we've been talking about this stuff for a long time and saying, we got to preserve our freedom. I think that could be both a very good thing and a very dangerous thing.
Well, here's one other thing that I actually warn people about. And there's a big push on a lot of fronts for a new constitutional convention, a convention of states. One of the big backers of a convention of states is George Soros.
Yeah.
And people do not understand what they're asking for when they are asking for a convention of state in order to enact term limits, in order to enact a balanced budget amendment, and things like that. They do not grasp the full impact of what a convention of states can mean. And they do not understand that the last convention of states that happened, the governing document that was in effect was completely abandoned for something new. Now we ended up with the Constitution, which is great. Okay, and as you all know, I am a full supporter of the Constitution.
Well, the reason
I am
that
afraid of what we would end up with today if we had that same type of constitution of states or convention of states.
I agree.
Absolutely.
I agree.
I agree that people don't understand convention of states because they're not willing to look into it and read the fine print and see everything that's involved. But on a deeper note, we were talking about the Constitution and changes it will probably see. And I hate to say that, but I'm afraid there could be a point in my lifetime where I see them go into museums and remove the Constitutions from museums like it never existed.
Well, they've gotten rid of statues. They've gotten
That's
rid of.
what I mean. This
Yeah.
cancel culture is insane, and I don't think they're anywhere near done.
Oh no,
But the
absolutely not.
Lucy, I think they're getting even more desperate, and they're doing more extreme stuff because we're starting to see, Chile, they rejected it on an international level. People are rejecting. In France, they actively are trying to prevent the ideologies coming from American institutions into their country. We're seeing that, She-Hulk, the Rings of Power, all of the entertainment that's being shoved down our throats, all of that stuff's being rejected on a regular, consistent basis. People are going, no. I think they're getting more desperate, and I think they're going to try and push even more. Yeah, Fauci said he's going to leave, and what is it? Pelosi said she wants, or it is rumored, and I think it's true that Pelosi's like, I'm going to Italy. I'm going to be an ambassador.
Okay, so as you guys know, I end up finding stuff all over the place. Okay, so one thing that's been popping up is how the U.S. stole this and the U.S. stole that. So hold on a second. I'm going to get this up and then I'll share it.
Okay.
Okay.
Is it a video of the squad standing in front of a
No.
paper printer making money?
No. No, it's actually worse.
There's not much worse than Ilhan Omar besides AOC.
Okay.
Well, there is Mayor Beetlejuice in Chicago.
Oh, yeah, Lori Lightfoot. Psychotic woman that she is.
Through a line. The line went right along this little mountain range, and it was meant as a boundary. Back in London, they were saying that no English settler was allowed to settle west of this line. The British Empire did this because they were worried that if settlers started to expand into the west, they would bring the British Empire into a war with native populations. They also didn't want to unnecessarily piss off France, who also had land in the west. So they told their settlers to settle, but not past this line. And then the settlers completely ignored it.
So this is how the U.S. stole Mexico.
These settlers would eventually declare independence from Britain and start their own country. And from there,
and this
the
is
floodgates were
13-minute
open
video.
for westward.
What did you say?
Okay, that video that I have up is entitled How the U.S. Stole Mexico. And basically they're saying that California, Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, Colorado, Nevada, Idaho are Mexico. Okay,
No.
and the United States stole that.
Well, that's just
There's
wrong.
another video out called How the U.S. Stole Hawaii.
That's wrong too.
Okay, but here's the thing. These are things that are being pressed and pushed as how the United States was this thieving, conquering nation. Okay.
But they're empirically wrong.
Exactly. Exactly. Okay. But people don't know that. They don't get that. They don't understand that.
And they're not willing to question it.
Exactly. Okay. They believe because it has this historical documentation that, okay, But what they don't understand, this is a revisionist historical documentation
Yeah.
that they are seeing. It's like the 1819 project, and many other things that have been categorically debunked. However, they are still being pushed as things that we need to be adopting in our mainstream. This is how they're also trying to fight against the Constitution. They're using how a lot of people, a lot of the framers of the Constitution were also slave owners. Well, we got to look at what was happening globally at that time. Also, they try to claim that the Constitution was established in order to preserve slavery. No, if you actually read the Constitution, there are clauses in the Constitution that were working towards getting rid of slavery.
They have no concept of what the 3/5 clause is about. There's a whole thing about that because they were trying to abolish slavery.
Okay. Well, they don't understand too that if you actually look in Article 9, the last clause, there is a stipulation that after it's actually 20 years after the Constitution is ratified, that Congress can start enacting laws to abolish slavery. Okay, the 3/5 clause actually worked against the North. Okay, and it did roundaboutly preserve slavery. And the reason why it did preserve slavery was because it increased representation of slave owning states.
As a counter to the fact that the North was more industrialized and they were trying to balance that out, and the South would not agree unless they were able to they wanted to count slaves as property and increase the number of votes they had without giving the slaves any votes. That's why we got the 3/5. It was a compromise.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And it was a compromise.
But also, what a lot of people don't understand is Virginia was our most populous state at that time, and Virginia was advocating for the abolishment of slavery.
Yeah. But I mean, my God, this is what happens when you don't teach kids history.
Mm-hmm.
Or about the
well,
government.
when you don't teach kids the full history.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, when you take snippets of history and teach those little snippets and teach many things out of context.
It's like the fact that they don't, you know what? If you ask the average person, an average kid in college today, does slavery still exist? And their answer is going to be, no, of course not. We got rid of it. No, slavery exists right this second. Go through Africa. Mm-hmm. It's all over the place. There's slavery all over the world.
Yeah.
But they're like, oh, no, but we got rid of it. No, we didn't.
Slavery still exists in this country. Slavery still exists in this country. It's just underground now. Okay? It happens through human trafficking. It happens with a lot of the prostitutes that you see in these ghettoized areas, okay, that are being forced out on the street.
Yeah,
okay, slavery happens today. It's being done by drug mules that are forced into that type of system.
Sweatshops. Yeah.
Right. Okay. And it happens to a lot of people that are in this country illegally, okay, that are undocumented. Because they got here through irreputable means, most cases via the cartel, and they are now enslaved to the cartels.
Which is not a reason why we should make them citizens. We should kick them out. my personal point of view.
Okay. We are well over our 2-hour mark.
Yeah, I
Okay,
know.
like,
It's late.
and we could actually talk about this for another 10 hours.
To be continued.
I mean,
Yeah.
there's so much that we could talk about, but I've got an early morning in the morning. Jeremy, I know he needs to get going.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you've got things that you got to get to also, Michael.
Yeah, I just got
I want to thank everybody that participated in the chat. I want to thank everybody that participated in the conversation tonight. I'm sorry that Frank had to go because I'm sure he would have had a lot of good stuff to input on this as well. I am going to encourage everyone to read. Okay. If you don't like reading, get an Audible subscription. Okay. And start listening to things that happened in our history. Okay. And don't just pick things like the 1819 Project. Okay. Try to find a very diverse selection of historical record. Okay. And try to get it from all sides because history is not what one person says it is. History is what you find out when you look at it from many different points of view. Okay.
And we are not being paid by anyone for this. This
No,
is just your
absolutely
benefit. Although if they want to pay us for it, hey, we're open. They're not yet. They're not yet.
Okay. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and sign off. If for some reason you find that our page is gone or you go looking for us on YouTube or any of that and you don't find us, you can always find us at l1f.us. That is our website, and we do have a lot of information there. And there are some things in the works that we are going to be starting to do a few changes on that. We've also got some exciting announcements that will be coming up in the future, some things that we are in the process of working on. And hopefully you guys will find it as exciting as we are getting ready for it. So stay tuned. Join us every week here live on YouTube and on our Facebook page. I've been trying to get it to go live on our Facebook group and been having problems with that. But you can find us on our Facebook page, which is the Liberty First Foundation on Facebook. You can find us here every Friday night at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. With that, I'm going to say good night. Thank you, everybody, and we'll see you next week.
Good night, everybody.
Night, everyone. Mm-hmm.